right. I mean, Missouri is integral to this case for that reason. In 1981, the Missouri General Assembly enacted a statute that created the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority. So it's a creature of statute that administrates student loan payment and repayment under state law. It is an absolute creature of statute. They owe money to the state in the Lewis and Clark Discovery Fund that's used to pay for capital improvements in higher education facilities. And they also fund scholarships. So there's direct concrete harm to the state of Missouri if those student loan repayments to Mohila are canceled by President Biden's plan.
One of the justices asked, why did that agency not advance this case? Why is it coming from the Attorney General of Missouri?
Well, they didn't need to be there because I was there for them. I mean, they're an entity of the state. Their directors are appointed by the governor and serve 5-year terms. They're a creature of statute, and they can only do what they're authorized to do by the General Assembly, and I represent the state of Missouri under statutes that give me that authority. It's a regular occurrence that the Missouri Attorney General's office represents the state, and that client agencies are maybe named in the suit but don't appear in court because the AG goes on their behalf. So there's nothing uncommon about that, and it doesn't change the fact that the people of the state of Missouri suffer a concrete harm from President Biden's bailout.
So, General Bailey, your assessment based upon today's oral arguments?
I think it went well. I think the conservative justices showed skepticism about the merits of the case. I think that it's significant that Chief Justice John Roberts didn't latch on to the standing issue, and that's something that he would otherwise be concerned about. At the end of the day, the Solicitor General's office can't get around the fact that Mohila is a creature of Missouri statute and is a governmental entity that performs a quintessentially governmental function, public function. And so standing is proper, and I like where we are in the suit.
You don't have to comment on this, but I think that the students are about to get kind of an addendum to their education. It's going to be political science, because they're going to realize it's going to be their first bait and switch, because this came right before the election, I think, as an enticement to young people to support President Biden and the Democratic Party, and they're going to find out that they were promised something that they're not going to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. Look, like I said, I stand by my conviction that President Biden knows this is unconstitutional and illegal. That's why he tried to get a bill passed, and when he couldn't, he had to lean on his unelected federal bureaucrats, and they're trying to hide an elephant in a mouse hole, which the Supreme Court has rejected in the past.
This was taken on an expedited basis, if I'm not mistaken. So do you think you'll get a decision on this prior to the end of this term this coming summer?
Yeah, we're hopeful. I mean, I think that we would get a decision no later than June. So hopefully in the next 90 to 120 days, we would have some clarity from the court. And look, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals has already found that standing's proper because of the nature of the relationship between the state and Mohila. And so I like where we are in litigation, and I'm hopeful we'll have an answer pretty soon.
Were you in the courtroom for the other case that was presented?
I was.
What's your sense on that case?
Yeah, you know, private plaintiffs, I think that it's a harder argument to make. Certainly the court spent more time on our case, which preceded the private plaintiff's case. And that's not to undermine the arguments they're making. I think there are significant arguments that need to be considered closely. But, you know, I think it's clear if you just look at the amount of time allocated to the arguments that the court spent more time on the state's case.
So if, very quickly, we're almost up against a break, if they were to say that you don't have standing, but who would have standing?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, someone has to be able to challenge the constitutionality of President Biden's violation of separation of powers, and who better than states, especially when I can show concrete harm to the state of Missouri.
Okay, so fill us in on the background of this.
Well, our office was notified by the whistleblower and provided sworn testimony in the form of an affidavit. And, you know, when this kind of whistleblower steps forward, you got to take these allegations seriously because it's children's lives that are put at risk. And if you look at the whistleblower herself, this is a person that self-describes as a progressive who's married to a transgender man who asked to be a case manager at a pediatric transgender clinic because she believes in transgender rights. So when she says this is going too far and harming children, you got to take that seriously, and that's what we've done. And so to that end, we have launched a multi-agency investigation. We're proud to be leading that effort, and we're not gonna stop until every stone is unturned and we get to the bottom of it and hold people accountable.
So first question, this whistleblower credible?
Yeah, I mean, based on the four corners of the affidavit, I believe that to be accurate. I mean, again, this is someone who believes in this stuff, but even says these behaviors go too far. And this isn't medicine. This is child abuse. That's the allegation she's making.
So let's talk about some of those allegations. What is she alleging is actually occurring in the center?
Well, first and foremost, she says that the transgender clinic is administering puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and ultimately recommending surgery for minors who enter the clinic with gender dysphoria, and that they're doing that to the exclusion of psychology or psychiatry. So in other words, kids walk in with a mental health disorder, and instead of talking to them, the doctors and the clinicians race to administer pills and surgery. And we know these have lifelong deleterious consequences for the health of these kids that turn into adults.
And I've actually read there have been cases out of that clinic where there have been procedures taken irreversible, and within just a couple of months, these young people have come back and say, I want to reverse this.
And they can't.
You can't.
I mean, that's the problem. And the other thing is, this causes lifelong health consequences that require the patients to be constantly receiving medical treatment. So it's almost like getting hooked on a drug that you can't then get off of.
Perpetually.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's why other nations across the globe have kind of rejected the medication and surgery model in favor of psychology and psychiatry. Talk to the people with mental health problems instead of instantly jumping to medication and surgery.
I mean, what's the motive behind this? I mean, maybe you're not far enough into your investigation to see if it's driven by an ideology. Is it driven by a profit motive?
Well, and I think it could be both. I mean, the two aren't mutually exclusive, and who can say which predominates over the other? But if even a tenth of the allegations in the affidavit are true, they're abusing children and not putting in the best interest of the children first.
General Bailey, talk about the coercion that comes into play with parents. What are they doing to coerce parents?
Well, look, with serious procedures like this, there needs to be parental consent under state law. And the allegation that the whistleblower makes is that there was inadequate or not real substantive parental consent. And in fact, parents were coerced into making these decisions. And so doctors would say things in front of the parent and the patient child, like, do you want a live son or a dead daughter? I mean, think about that. They're injecting a suicidal ideation into the conversation with the child. How can the child ever recover from that? So again, these people come in with mental health problems, and they're in such a race to administer medication and surgery that they're saying things like that in front of the kids. Well, what decision can the parent make at that point? And the problem is the clinic's not doing any kind of clinical assessment or tracking the harms.
You're the attorney for the state of Missouri, and I know you can't provide legal counsel, but look, to me, that sounds like forcing someone under in a distressing situation to make a decision that is life-altering. I would think that there's liability for this clinic from these parents who feel like they made this under distress and they want to come back and rectify it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, look, this is an all-hands-on-deck approach. Like you said, we're going to leave no stone unturned. We're going to use every body of law necessary to protect kids and hold people accountable. And I would assume that there are individual plaintiffs that would have claims to bring as well, especially if they were under duress, coerced into making these difficult decisions that have lifelong consequences.
What's the status of the investigation, and what's the timeline you see playing out here?
Well, we spent the first couple of weeks reviewing the evidence and marshaling state resources. And so there are different buckets of law that this fits into. There's the professional licensure bucket. So did anyone abuse the ethical and legal standards of their licensure? There's the Medicaid fraud compliance statute that includes criminal liability. And then there's the consumer protection statute. And so each of those processes move at a different pace, but we anticipate forward progress, and we're doing our best to expedite because we understand the importance of protecting children. And to that end, we called on the clinic to institute a moratorium on taking new patients. Pencils down until we can get to the bottom of this. And if kids are being harmed, we got to put a stop to it. And the clinic acknowledged the seriousness of the allegations and admitted that they're going to do an internal investigation, but declined the moratorium. And at this point in time, a moratorium is the best safety measure we can put in place to protect the kids, and we hope that the clinic will see the light of day on that issue.
And it's not just a couple of young people going in there. I mean, in a 2-year period from 2020 to 2022, they initiated medical transition for more than 600 children.
Well, and there's another point of this, and that is that the individuals from the clinic testified to the Missouri General Assembly just a year ago that surgery was never recommended for anyone under 18. Well, that is directly contradicted by the whistleblower's testimony in the form of the affidavit. So there's a lot going on here. And again, that's why it's imperative that we stand up and fight to protect the kids and put an end to this. And that you've seen that trend across the globe, that other more progressive nations like England, Finland have stepped away from this. Yeah. So, I think the eyes of history are on us right now and will judge our behavior.
Yeah. I mean, it's so out of step with everything else we do. You're left scratching your head. What's behind it? What's driving it? General Bailey, I want to thank you for joining us on two topics. Thank you for fighting for taxpayers, and thank you for fighting for the children.
Thank you for having me.